Hello, welcome to section 8.3. What we're going to do is talk about calculating something called the interquartile range. Let's talk about upper and lower fences of data and how to calculate outliers, which are really high or really low values that are kind of outside of the normal on your data. So we'll go through a couple problems, we'll make a box and whisker plot, and we'll calculate all these things. So I'll start off with these first ones that say calculate the IQR of the data set. Determine whether there are any outliers in the data set, and then we'll list them. So how this will work is we'll put all the data into a calculator, let the calculator do the work where it's going to calculate our 5-number summary for us, and then from there we can calculate what the IQR is and then what those fences are, and then you determine the outliers. So what I'll do is bring up the calculator, and what we'll do is go to Stat. We're going to go to Edit and start entering the data in. So 4, 4, 5, 5, 8, 9, 10, 10. Okay, so I have all the data in. I went incredibly fast, so you can always pause the video and try it yourself. Once your data is in, I'm going to go to Stat. We're going to go over to Calculate, and we'll calculate our one variable statistics. So what we're going to get from all this information is, if you scroll down, we're going to have our 5-number summary. So what I'm going to do is copy down these 5 values that are on here: the min, the first quartile, the median, the third quartile, and the maximum value. So, I have 4, 5, 10, 14, and 30. So what I'll do off to the side is write these values down. My minimum is 4, Q1 is 5, my median value is 10, Q3 is 14, and then the highest maximum value is 30. So first thing we do to calculate interquartile range is you're talking about what's between the first and third quartile. So what I'm going to do in order to calculate IQR, the interquartile range, you just take Q3 and you subtract Q1. So it kind of works like if I were to say calculate the range of the data, you would take your maximum value and subtract your minimum value. So that would be the range. If it's the interquartile range, you're just subtracting what's on the inside of your 2 quartiles. So 14 minus 5 gives me an interquartile range of 9. So that's part of your data. That tells you where a huge chunk of the middle of your data is going to lie. So if I were to make a rough box and whisker plot to demonstrate what this would look like, your interquartile range would be this chunk of data right here. Here would be your minimum, and here would be your maximum. So the next part is to calculate the fences. So we're going to calculate something called the lower fence, which will tell me that anything past that lower fence, if there's any numbers lower than the lower fence, those will be outliers. And then we'll calculate something called the upper fence, which will be on the other end of the spectrum. And if anything is past the upper fence, that would be considered an outlier. So the really extremely high or extremely low values are going to be considered outliers, but you have to calculate the fences first. So in order to do that, what you do is you take the interquartile range and you multiply by 1.5. And the 1.5 is a number that some kind of statistician came up with at some point, and I'll show you how we're going to use it. So we're going to take the 9 from the interquartile range, and I'm going to multiply by 1.5, and that's going to give me a value that we're going to use then. So that's going to be the 13.5, and we can use that for the lower and the upper fence. So how you calculate the lower fence is you take your first quartile and you subtract the 13.5. And for the upper fence, you're going to take your third quartile and you're going to add the 13.5. So if I look at my little diagram up here for a box and whisker plot, when you take that first quartile where my cursor is and you subtract the 13.5, it's going to give you where your lower fence would indicate. And then if I go from where the third quartile is, it wouldn't make sense to subtract. So we add the 13.5, and it tells you if anything past that is in your data set, that would be considered an outlier. So my first quartile was 10. Or I'm sorry, my first quartile was 5. So I take 5 minus 13.5, and that's going to give me my lower fence then. So that's going to be negative 8.5. And then over here, I'm going to take 14 and add my 13.5, and that'll give me my upper fence, which is going to be 27.5. So again, now that I have my fences, I want to look in my data set if anything is lower than negative 8.5 or higher than 27.5. So I go all the way back up here. Notice that I don't have anything lower than negative 8.5. So there's no outlier on the lower end of it, but I do have a data point that is higher than my upper fence. We have something that is past 27.5, and that is this value of 30. So when it says calculate any of your outliers, what you're going to do is say 30 is an outlier. And the reason for that, again, it is past the upper fence. So if I were to draw these fences, and let's pretend this is my box and whisker plot, my lower fence, since this is a minimum value of 4, my lower fence, the negative 8.5, would be out here somewhere. The upper fence would be here somewhere. So what that means is that anything past that upper fence is considered an outlier. Here's another data set. With this one, we're going to do the same exact process, except what I'm going to do is make a box and whisker plot. I'll show you what the box and whisker plot will look like before and after we identify what our outliers are. So I'm going to go to the calculator, and we'll calculate our 5-number summary for this. So what I'm going to do is clear out the data that we had before, and now I can enter in my new data. Okay, so now that my data is in here, we're going to go to Stat, and we're going to go over to Calculate, and calculate the one variable statistics. So here's my 5-number summary. I have 13 terms. I have a 5-number summary of 8 for my minimum, 18.5 is my first quartile, 21 is the median, 25 is the third quartile, and 32 is my maximum value. So I'm going to copy down that 5-number summary to the left here. Minimum lowest value, again, is 8. My first quartile is 18.5. I have a median value of 21. I have a third quartile, which is at 25, and my maximum value is 32. So it's nice the calculator does all that work for you. What we're going to do next then is create a box and whisker plot. So I'm going to say that this is going to be my number line. And what I'm going to do is find some kind of scale that I'm just going to count by just to approximate where these values are. I'm going to start down here at 5, and I'm just going to count by 5s. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35. So this is going to contain all my values. What I'm going to do is mark off where these 5 values are. So 8 is approximately right here. 18.5 would be somewhere about here. 21 for the median. 25 is my third quartile. And then 32. So what you do is box up the middle 3 and then attach the whiskers. So you can see that the data looks like it is skewed left. This left whisker is a little bit longer than the right one. And everything's shifted a little bit to the right, which means our data is skewed left, so we might have an outlier on the lower end of the data. So in order to find out what that outlier is, I first need to calculate the IQR and the fences. So my IQR, we're going to take Q3 minus Q1. So 25 minus 18.5, and that's going to give me the IQR of 6.5. What that means is all the values in this inner quartile range here are basically 6.5 from the lowest value to the highest value. So then using the 6.5, we multiply it by 1.5. And again, we are always going to be taking the IQR and multiplying it by 1.5. And that gives me 9.75. So this is the value that we use to really calculate our fences. So in order to get the lower fence, LF, we're going to take Q1 and subtract 9.75. And in order to get the upper fence, we're going to take Q3 and add the 9.75. I just wrote that backwards. So Q1 is the 18.5. So I'm going to take 18.5 and subtract 9.75, and that's going to calculate that lower fence. So if anything is below that value, that will be considered an outlier. So 8.75 is my lower fence. In order to calculate the upper fence, I'm going to take 25 and I'm going to add 9.75, which tells me if anything is above the upper fence, that would be an outlier. And my upper fence is 34.75. So what I'm going to do, just to show you where these numbers are on the box and whisker plot, is identify that 8.75 is somewhere right about here for a lower fence, and 34.75 is somewhere up here. So if my two fences are down there and up here, well, I have no values that are past my upper fence, so there's no outliers on this side, but I do have a data value that is below my lower fence of 8.75. So I'm going to indicate that my one data point that is below my lower fence is 8. So 8 is an outlier. And now what I'm going to do is update this box and whisker plot. So I'll show you how we do that. I'm going to create one down here that's going to have the same scale. And what I'm going to do now is find where 8 is, where 8 was my minimum value before, but now that I'm indicating that 8 is an outlier, what you're going to do is go to 8 and put an asterisk above where 8 goes. Since it's an outlier, it's not going to be part of, well, it's kind of part of our box and whisker plot, but it's not going to be considered our minimum value anymore. What we're going to do next is find the next lowest value of all of these data points, and that's going to be your new minimum. So it's going to be 10. So all that I'm going to do is take that lower whisker and mark it at 10, and then we'll keep the rest of the 5-number summary the same. So the 18.5 was here, 21, 25, and 32. So identifying the outliers and then shrinking the box and whisker plot down a little bit is going to make this left whisker and the right whisker seem a little bit more proportional. And again, we have that outlier indicated on here that 8 was an outlier, so it is on our box and whisker plot. It is just no longer considered our minimum value. So that is everything. Again, what we did is calculated IQR, and then that would help us find what the fences were, and then from there we could identify what the outliers were.